At first, honeycomb seems simple. A golden sheet of wax, rows of small cells, a few honeybees walking across the surface, touching the edges with their legs and antennae. Some cells shine with liquid, some are packed with pollen, some are sealed under pale wax caps, and some, hidden deeper inside the hive, hold the young bees that will become the next generation of the colony. The honeycomb most people picture comes from honeybees, especially the western honeybee, Apis mellifera. This is the species kept in many managed hives across North America and Europe, and it is one of the main bees people think of when they imagine honey, wax, and wooden hive boxes. But honeycomb is older than the boxes people build for bees. Long before movable frames, glass observation hives, and backyard beekeeping, honeybees were building wax comb inside tree hollows, rock cavities, and sheltered spaces where a swarm could turn empty air into a working home. A honeycomb cell is not just a tiny cup. It can be a nursery. It can be a pantry. It can be a drying room for nectar. It can be a sealed storage chamber for honey. It can be a place where a bee begins as an egg, grows as a larva, rests as a pupa, and finally chews its way out as an adult. That is part of what makes honeycomb so interesting. One repeated shape does many jobs. The same wax wall that holds food on one day may help support the weight of a cluster of bees on another. The same surface that looks still in a photograph can become crowded with movement when workers clean cells, feed larvae, unload nectar, pack pollen, repair edges, and pass information through touch and vibration. The hexagonal pattern is the detail that usually catches the eye. Each open cell has 6 sides fitted tightly beside its neighbors. There are no large gaps between the cells. The walls are shared. The space is used carefully. This matters because beeswax is not an easy material for bees to make. It does not come from flowers in ready-made sheets. Worker bees produce it from their own bodies, as tiny pale scales that come from wax glands on the underside of the abdomen. A worker removes those small flakes, softens them, chews them, and adds them to the growing comb. So the golden structure inside a hive is not just built by bees. It is made from food energy, body chemistry, heat, and steady labor. Honeycomb is also 3-dimensional. It is not only a flat pattern of hexagons. Each cell has depth. Each cell has an open mouth and wax walls reaching inward. In many combs, cells are built on both sides of the same sheet, back to back, so the comb becomes a double-sided structure. On one face, a worker may be placing nectar into an open cell. On the other face, another worker may be tending brood or sealing honey under a thin wax cap. This is why honeycomb is better understood as architecture than as decoration. It is the built center of colony life. A queen needs cells where she can lay eggs. Nurse bees need cells where larvae can grow. Foragers need space to store nectar and pollen after returning from flowers. Workers need surfaces where they can walk, cluster, clean, repair, and communicate in the darkness of the nest. A honeybee colony is not just a crowd of insects. It is a living system organized around wax. The more closely we look at honeycomb, the less it feels like a simple background object. It becomes the place where the colony stores sunlight gathered from flowers. It becomes the place where young bees develop in darkness. It becomes the structure that holds food through cold weather, supports the weight of thousands of bodies, and gives order to the hidden life inside the hive. And before its perfect-looking cells can make sense, one quieter question has to come first. Why does a colony need to build this structure at all? A swarm begins as a hanging mass of bees. Thousands of workers cling to one another from a branch, a fence rail, or the rough side of a tree, while scout bees search for a place where the colony can settle. For the western honeybee, Apis mellifera, a good wild home is often an enclosed cavity. A hollow tree is one of the classic places. So is a space inside a wall, a gap in an old building, or a sheltered box prepared by a beekeeper. The swarm carries no wooden frame with it. It carries no stored honeycomb from the old nest. What it carries is a living workforce, a queen, food inside the bodies of workers, and the ability to begin turning empty space into wax structure. Inside a new cavity, the bees first gather near the top. Workers hang in chains, each bee gripping another with its legs. Beekeepers call this festooning. The hanging bees form soft curtains of bodies beneath the ceiling of the nest space, and from those living chains, the first pale wax begins to appear. A colony has urgent work to organize. The queen needs clean cells where she can lay eggs. A healthy queen may lay many hundreds of eggs in a day during the growing season, and each egg needs a separate chamber. The youngest bees of the colony need protected places where they can pass through the stages of egg, larva, and pupa. Workers need storage space for nectar, which is the watery sugar liquid gathered from flowers. They also need cells for pollen, the powdery protein-rich food that flowers make and bees pack onto their hind legs. Without comb, all of this activity has nowhere stable to go. A cluster of bees can keep itself together for a short time. A growing colony needs rooms. The comb provides those rooms in a form bees can reach from every side. Workers walk over the wax surface with their 6 legs, testing cell edges with their antennae. They clean empty cells before the queen uses them. They lower their heads into open cells to feed larvae. They place droplets of nectar into storage cells. They press pollen into place and mix it with nectar and bee secretions until it becomes bee bread, a stored food used for feeding young bees. Every small chamber gives the colony another exact place to do one job. The nest also has to be guarded and kept clean. Dead bees, wax scraps, and bits of debris are carried away by workers. Openings are defended from wasps, robber bees, ants, and other intruders. Cells that have been used for brood are cleaned before they are used again. If a wax edge is damaged, workers can add new material and smooth the surface with their mouthparts. Comb turns a dark cavity into a place that can be maintained. The inside of the nest has a different rhythm from the outside world. Foragers leave through the entrance and fly to flowers, sometimes traveling more than a kilometer when nearby blooms are poor. They return with nectar in a honey stomach, or with pollen packed into baskets of stiff hairs on their hind legs. At the entrance, they step back into a warmer, darker space, where the colony's future depends on wax cells. Outside, the bee moves through air, light, weather, and flowers. Inside, the work becomes more exact. Nectar has to be unloaded. Pollen has to be stored. Larvae have to be fed again and again. The queen has to find prepared cells. The brood area has to stay warm enough for young bees to develop properly. Comb gives all of that work a shared structure. The same sheet can hold developing bees near the center, pollen close enough for nurse bees to reach, and honey above or around the brood area as an energy reserve. The arrangement can change as the colony grows, as flowers bloom and as seasons shift, but the colony still depends on built wax space. Some honeybee species build exposed combs in the open air, hanging from branches or cliffs. The western honeybee usually depends on the protection of a cavity, where sheets of comb can hang downward and form a hidden interior. In either case, the colony's life gathers around the same need: food, young bees, heat, movement, and repair all need a physical place. That place begins as wax, and wax is one of the most costly materials a bee colony can make. Inside the body of a young worker bee, part of the honeycomb begins before it can be seen. A worker honeybee is only about 1.5 centimeters long, yet her abdomen can become a tiny wax-making system. On the underside of that abdomen are special wax glands. These glands are most active in young adult workers, often when they are roughly between 12 and 18 days old, though the timing can shift with the needs of the colony. During that part of life, a worker may spend long hours inside the nest instead of flying outside to flowers. She helps feed larvae. She cleans cells. She joins other workers along the growing edge of the comb. Her body is turning stored food energy into building material. Beeswax does not appear as a soft lump. It comes out in small, thin scales. Each scale forms on a smooth area beneath the abdomen, then hardens into a pale flake. Fresh wax can look almost white, especially before it has been mixed with pollen oils, propolis, and the traces of repeated use. A single scale is tiny enough to seem almost weightless. It takes about 1,250 wax scales to make 1 gram of beeswax. A full honeycomb wall is built from thousands upon thousands of these small pieces, each one produced by a worker and moved into place by other parts of her body. The worker does not simply drop the scale onto the comb. She has to handle it. A bee can use her legs to reach the wax scale and move it forward. The scale passes toward the mouthparts, where the bee chews and softens it. The mouthparts include the mandibles, which are the small jaw-like parts bees use for gripping, shaping, and working material. The wax may be mixed with a little saliva as it is warmed and kneaded. Then the softened piece can be pressed onto the edge of a cell, added to a wall, or used to repair a thin spot. This is slow construction at a very small scale. A human hand might see only a pale sheet of comb. At the level of the bee, that sheet is a long record of flakes lifted from abdomens, passed forward, chewed, warmed, pressed, and reshaped. The colony also pays for wax in food. A common estimate says bees consume around 8 kilograms of honey to produce 1 kilogram of wax. The exact cost can vary with colony condition, temperature, nectar flow, and how actively bees are building. But the scale of the trade-off is clear. Wax is expensive. A kilogram of honey represents many flower visits. It represents nectar carried in the honey stomach, passed between workers, dried by moving air, stored in cells, and sealed when ready. When bees turn that stored energy into wax, they are spending part of their food supply to build the structure that will later hold more food. That loop is one of the quiet balances inside a hive. The colony must spend energy to create space. Then the space helps the colony gather, raise, and store enough to survive. Fresh comb often begins light in color. As weeks and months pass, the shade changes. Honey storage can add golden tones. Pollen can leave yellow and orange stains. Brood comb, where young bees develop, can become darker, because each developing larva spins a thin cocoon before becoming an adult. After many brood cycles, those traces remain inside the cells, along with propolis and other materials brought through the nest. Old comb can turn brown, then nearly black, while new wax still has that soft pale look of recent construction. A growing cell may pass through many worker bees before it looks complete. One bee adds wax to the rim, another smooths the wall, a third removes a rough bit and places material somewhere else. Each movement is small, but the wall becomes stronger as more pieces are joined. The result feels almost seamless, even though it began as separate scales. Beeswax gives the colony a rare kind of material. It can be made inside the nest. It can be softened with warmth. It can be shaped with mouthparts and legs. It can be repaired after damage. It can hold the weight of food, young bees, and thousands of moving workers. A material that costly pushes the colony toward careful building, because every extra wall, gap, and rough edge carries the price of honey already spent. That price changes the way honeycomb should be understood. A gram of beeswax is more than a gram of material. It is flower nectar gathered by foragers, carried back to the nest, changed into honey, eaten by workers, and transformed inside their bodies. It is also heat. Wax-producing bees do their work inside the warm nest, where the comb can be shaped and where the brood area must stay within a narrow, safe range. Building comb requires time from workers that could otherwise clean cells, feed larvae, guard the entrance, or receive nectar from returning foragers. During a strong nectar flow, when many flowers are blooming at once, the colony may need storage space quickly. In parts of eastern North America, for example, spring nectar can come from maple, willow, dandelion, clover, black locust, or basswood, depending on the region and the weather. A colony that has too little comb may have workers arriving with nectar and too few empty cells to place it in. That matters because nectar is watery. It needs to be spread into cells so moisture can evaporate. Crowded storage space can slow the process of turning nectar into stable honey. Comb also matters during colony growth. When days lengthen and fresh pollen begins coming in, the queen can lay eggs at a much faster pace. A strong queen of Apis mellifera may lay more than 1,000 eggs in a day during the busy season. Each egg needs one clean cell. 3 days later, that egg becomes a larva. The larva then needs repeated feeding from nurse bees before the cell is capped for the pupal stage. A shortage of usable comb can limit how much brood the colony can raise, even when the queen is ready and food is available. This is why bees do not treat old comb as disposable. A cell can have more than one life. After a young adult bee emerges, workers clean the cell. They remove bits left behind from development. They smooth the inside surface. They prepare it for another egg, or for pollen, or for nectar. A honey cell can be uncapped, emptied, cleaned, filled again, and sealed again when the colony has enough nectar to store. A damaged rim can be repaired with new wax. A rough spot can be reshaped. A gap can be closed. Comb becomes a reusable structure, and reuse saves the colony from making all of its wax again. Fresh comb has a pale color, sometimes nearly white when the wax is new. Over time, the shade changes. Honey storage may give comb a warmer yellow tone. Pollen can leave deeper yellow and orange traces around cell openings. Brood comb darkens more strongly because young bees develop inside those cells again and again. Before a larva becomes an adult, it spins a thin silk cocoon inside the cell. After many brood cycles, layers of cocoon material remain pressed against the wax. Workers also bring in propolis, a sticky resin gathered from tree buds and plant surfaces. Bees use propolis like a sealing material inside the nest, especially around cracks, rough edges, and small openings. Tiny pieces of propolis, dust, pollen oils, and other tracked-in material can become part of the older comb surface. A frame of brood comb that began pale may turn tan, then brown, then very dark after long use. Honey storage comb often stays lighter if larvae are not raised there season after season. The color tells part of the comb's history. A light piece may show recent building. A darker piece may show years of brood rearing, cleaning, capping, uncapping, and repair. Inside a hive, wax is a material the colony spends carefully and keeps using. That careful use helps explain the pressure behind the famous pattern. A colony gains more from wax when cell walls are shared. It gains more when empty space is reduced. It gains more when one repeated shape can hold food, brood, and stored pollen without needing thick walls between every chamber. The practical problem begins at the smallest scale, with one open cell and the thin wax walls around it. At that smallest scale, the comb becomes easier to understand. Look into one open cell on the surface. Its opening may be only about 5 millimeters across in a typical worker cell of Apis mellifera, close to the width of a small grain of rice turned sideways. Behind that opening, the cell continues inward as a narrow wax chamber. The sides are thin. The rim is slightly raised. The inner space is deep enough to hold an egg, a growing larva, a droplet of nectar, packed pollen, or finished honey. Seen from straight ahead, the cell looks like a flat, six-sided outline. Seen as a real object, it is a small room. Its walls reach backward from the opening. Its base closes the far end. Nearby cells press against it on every side, so the same wax wall can serve one chamber on the left and another chamber on the right. That shared wall is one reason honeycomb can be so efficient. The colony does not need a separate thick wall around every storage space. One thin boundary can divide two neighboring cells. That saves wax while still giving each cell a clear shape. A sheet of comb also has two working faces. Cells can open from one side of the wax sheet, while a second set of cells opens from the other side. They meet back to back inside the middle of the comb. The center is carefully formed. At the closed end of each cell, the base is made from angled wax surfaces that fit against the bases of cells on the opposite face. Those angled surfaces help the two sides lock together, giving the whole sheet more strength than a simple row of tubes would have. A worker walking across one face may lower her head into an open cell and test it with her antennae. On the other face, a different worker may be sealing honey, feeding brood, or cleaning a chamber that has just been emptied. The two sides belong to the same structure, yet each face can be busy with its own work. Comb makes use of space in both directions. The same cell form can serve different needs over time. A clean cell in the brood area may receive one egg from the queen. After about 3 days, that egg hatches into a larva, a small white young bee that must be fed by nurse workers. Later, workers seal the cell with a wax cap, while the larva changes into a pupa, the resting stage where the adult body forms. When the new bee emerges, the cell can be cleaned and used again. In another part of the comb, the same kind of chamber may hold nectar. At first, that nectar is thin and watery compared with honey. Workers place small droplets in cells, spread them out, move air through the hive with their wings, and gradually remove water. A cell can also hold pollen. Foragers bring pollen home in compact loads on their hind legs. Inside the nest, other workers press that pollen into cells and mix it with nectar or honey and bee secretions. This stored pollen food is often called bee bread. It becomes part of the diet for young bees that need protein to grow. So one wax chamber can move through several lives. It may begin empty. It may hold brood. It may be cleaned. It may store nectar. It may be filled with honey. It may be repaired along the rim after a piece breaks away. The cell is small, but its usefulness comes from being repeated thousands of times. A single chamber gives the colony one protected space. A sheet of chambers gives the colony a working interior. The strength comes from connection. The efficiency comes from shared walls. The order comes from having many similar rooms close enough for workers to reach, inspect, fill, clean, and reuse. From a distance, honeycomb can seem almost printed onto the wax. Up close, each cell has depth, thickness, angle, history, and purpose. A worker does not need to travel far across the surface before she passes from young bees to pollen, from pollen to nectar, from open cells to capped honey. The comb is a built landscape at insect scale. As one cell repeats beside another, the separate rooms become a continuous pattern. The wax has to divide space, hold weight, save material, and leave no useless gaps between chambers. That is where the six-sided shape begins to matter. Across the surface of the comb, one chamber touches the next. A single cell has value because it can hold one egg, one larva, one small load of nectar, or one packed store of pollen. Many cells joined together create a harder problem. The wax has to divide space again and again, while leaving as little unused room as possible. A simple round cell would be easy to picture. Round shapes are natural for soft materials. A drop of water becomes round. A bubble becomes round. A fresh wax chamber can begin with a rounded form, while workers shape its edges. Circles make good containers when they stand alone. Placed beside one another on a flat sheet, they leave small curved gaps between them. Those gaps matter inside a hive because every empty pocket would either waste space or require extra wax to fill. A colony building thousands of cells cannot afford many useless spaces between rooms. The problem is called tiling. Tiling means covering a surface with repeated shapes that fit together without open gaps. A bathroom floor can be tiled with squares. A honeycomb face is tiled with hexagons. Triangles can also tile a flat surface. 6 triangles can meet neatly around one point. Squares can tile as well, with 4 corners meeting at each crossing. Hexagons form a third simple tiling shape, with 6 sides around each cell and 3 cell corners meeting at many points across the comb. All 3 shapes can fill a flat surface. Their usefulness changes when the structure has to become a wax chamber. A triangle makes sharp, narrow corners. Those corners would give less gentle space inside each chamber and would create more edge for the amount of storage gained. A square fits cleanly beside other squares, yet its corners are farther from the center than its sides. A hexagon sits between the flat world of tiling and the rounded world of containers. Its 6 sides let it share walls with 6 neighbors. Its shape stays closer to a circle than a square or triangle does, while still filling space without gaps. That is why the hexagon is such a strong answer to the comb problem. The colony needs many small rooms. Each room needs enough volume to be useful. The walls need to stay thin because wax is costly. The edges need to connect because a comb has to support honey, pollen, brood, and moving bees. With hexagons, the same wall can serve two neighboring cells. One thin partition separates two spaces. Another partition supports the next space beside it. Across the sheet, the pattern keeps sharing material. Mathematicians have studied this kind of problem for a long time. The idea, often called the honeycomb problem, asks which repeated shape can divide a flat surface into equal areas while using the least total wall length. In 1999, the mathematician Thomas Hales published a proof showing that the regular hexagonal pattern gives the most efficient answer for that flat, equal area version of the problem. Bees did not wait for a human proof. Honeybees were building comb for millions of years before modern mathematics gave the pattern a formal explanation. Still, the proof helps show why the shape is so powerful. A regular hexagonal grid uses less boundary length than other ways of dividing the same flat space into equal parts. For bees, less boundary length means less wax for the same amount of usable chamber area. The savings become important at colony scale. One cell may only use a tiny rim of wax. A strong colony can contain many tens of thousands of cells across its combs. Small savings repeated again and again become a large difference in stored food, brood space, and worker labor. This does not mean bees sit in the dark and understand geometry as a school subject. Their bodies, instincts, and materials guide the building process. Each worker responds to nearby wax, nearby bees, empty space, warmth, and the shape already forming beneath her legs. The hexagon is the visible result of those many small actions. Its beauty comes from usefulness. It packs space tightly. It shares walls. It gives the colony many chambers without filling the nest with extra wax. That first answer is satisfying, and it explains why the six-sided pattern is so common in honeycomb. The harder part is hidden in the making. Soft wax, warm bodies, tiny mouthparts, and thousands of local adjustments still have to turn a growing edge of comb into those steady rows of cells. At the growing edge of a comb, the famous six-sided shape is still becoming itself. A finished honeycomb face can look almost too orderly, as if each cell had been drawn with a tiny ruler. Inside the hive, the work is rougher, softer, and more physical. A worker bee stands on wax that other bees have already touched. Her antennae sweep across the surface. Her mandibles grip the rim. Her legs brace against nearby workers and nearby cell walls. The cell in front of her may already have a clean six-sided opening, or it may still be uneven, thick in one place, thin in another, and slightly rounded near the edge. Evidence suggests that natural honeybee cells can begin closer to circles than to sharp hexagons. Researchers studying young comb have described new cells at their earliest stage as rounded chambers. The six-sided form appears more clearly as neighboring cells grow, press together, and share their walls. This makes the honeycomb pattern feel less like a shape stamped onto wax, and more like a shape that develops while the wax is being worked. A single rounded cell can hold space. Several rounded cells packed closely together begin to change one another. Where one cell touches another, the wall between them becomes shared. Where 3 cells meet, the wax gathers at a junction. Those junctions are important because the final honeycomb pattern depends on how the walls and corners settle between neighboring chambers. One explanation is that warm wax can shift slightly near these meeting points. As the wax softens, surface tension may help pull the material into more even boundaries. Surface tension is the same kind of physical effect that helps small drops of liquid pull into smooth shapes. In honeycomb, the material is wax rather than water, and the movement is much slower and more limited. Still, the idea helps explain how rounded early cells could become rounded hexagons as their walls meet. The process is also shaped by bees themselves. Worker bees are active builders. They do not wait beside the comb while physics finishes the job. They add wax. They remove wax. They pinch, chew, press, and smooth the surface. They measure space with their bodies because a bee's own size helps set the working distance between cell walls. A worker can place her head or body near a growing cell and adjust the wax edge by touch. Her antennae are sensitive enough to explore small differences in surface and shape. Her mandibles can scrape away a bit of extra material or press a softened piece into place. This is why the exact formation of honeycomb has been debated. One view gives more weight to the physical behavior of warmed wax. Another gives more weight to the careful actions of bees shaping each wall. The strongest picture includes both. The bees create the starting structure and keep correcting it. The wax responds to heat, pressure, contact, and neighboring cells. The final hexagon grows out of that partnership between animal behavior and material physics. Small irregularities can remain. Honeycomb cells in a real hive are usually close to hexagonal, but they are rarely perfect in the way a printed diagram is perfect. Some cell walls are slightly curved. Some corners are rounded. Some cells stretch a little where the comb changes direction, attaches to wood, or transitions from worker cells to larger drone cells. At the edge of a natural comb, the pattern can become especially uneven because the bees are still expanding the structure into open space. These small differences matter because they show the comb as a living construction project. The familiar pattern is steady enough to store honey and raise brood, yet flexible enough to grow, bend, and be repaired. A torn edge can be rebuilt. A cell rim can be thickened. A rough patch can be smoothed by many workers over time. The hexagon appears because the colony keeps pushing wax toward efficient shared walls. Heat is the quiet condition beneath all of this work. Cold wax resists change. Warm wax can be shaped. Inside a hive, bees manage warmth with their own bodies, and that warmth changes what the comb can become. To follow the hexagon all the way into being, the wax has to be seen as a material that softens, flows a little, stiffens again, and holds the memory of every small pressure placed upon it. A piece of beeswax changes with warmth. Cool wax feels firmer and more brittle. Warm wax can bend, soften, and take a new shape under pressure. Inside a honeybee nest, that difference matters every hour that comb is being built. The wax does not need to melt into liquid to be useful. It only needs to become workable enough for a bee to press, pull, smooth, and join it to nearby wax. A worker bee brings her whole small body into that work. Her mandibles grip the edge of a cell. Her front legs brace against the surface. Her antennae touch the rim and nearby walls, giving her constant information about the shape in front of her. She can add a softened wax scale to a growing edge, press it flat, or scrape away a small uneven place. Several workers may handle the same rim over time, each making a tiny adjustment that changes the final shape. The hive itself helps make this possible. A honeybee colony is warm inside, especially near the brood nest, where young bees are developing. Workers can generate heat by using their flight muscles while staying in place. Those are the same strong muscles that normally power the wings during flight. Inside the nest, a bee can use them like a tiny heater. When many bees cluster close together, their bodies trap warmth around the comb. That warmth keeps the wax easier to shape and helps protect the brood developing nearby. A cold piece of wax resists a bee's mouthparts. A warmer piece can be pinched and thinned. Along the edge of new comb, workers may add wax where a wall needs to grow. In a thick place, they may remove or redistribute material. At a rough corner, they may chew the wax until it becomes smoother. The work happens at a scale so small that a human watching from outside a glass hive might only see bees shifting, touching, and pausing. At the level of the cell, those movements are construction. Wax can be pressed into a wall only a fraction of a millimeter thick. It can be joined to another piece until the seam becomes hard to see. It can be drawn into a rim that gives the cell a cleaner opening. As neighboring cells grow close together, the softness of the material helps them settle into shared boundaries. A rounded chamber beside another rounded chamber begins to lose the empty space between them. Where the cells meet, wax becomes a common wall. Where several walls come together, a corner forms. The final six-sided shape comes from many of these meetings repeated across the comb face. The comb is made by bees, and it is also shaped by what warm wax can do under touch, pressure, and time. This is why honeycomb formation belongs partly to biology and partly to physics. Biology gives the colony its workers, glands, mouthparts, legs, body heat, and building behavior. Physics gives the wax its softness, stiffness, surface tension, and response to pressure. Surface tension is the tendency of a material's surface to pull into a tighter, smoother form. In liquids, it helps form droplets. In warm wax, the effect is much slower and more limited. Yet it can still help explain why rounded walls may settle into smoother shared edges when cells press together. The bees keep working while the material responds. They do not need to finish every cell in a single act. A growing comb can be revisited many times. An edge can be thickened in the morning and thinned later. A small uneven patch can be corrected after nearby cells change shape. A cell that begins as a soft rounded chamber can become part of a stronger pattern as the wax cools and stiffens. Once the material hardens, the shape holds. That is part of the value of beeswax. It can be flexible during construction and firm during use. It can receive pressure from a worker's mouthparts, then later support honey, pollen, brood, and the weight of bees walking above it. Warmth makes the building possible. Cooling makes the building dependable. Across the comb, many workers repeat these small actions at the same time. Some add wax, some smooth edges, some inspect open cells, some cluster close enough to keep the building area warm. The pattern grows through all of them, even though no single bee controls the full sheet. A honeycomb cell has local makers, local pressures, and local corrections. The larger order appears when thousands of those local acts begin to fit together. Along the growing edge of a natural comb, several workers may be building at once. The first strips of wax often hang from an attachment point above, such as the roof of a tree hollow, the inside top of a wall cavity, or the upper bar of a hive frame. From there, the comb grows downward. At first, it may look like a soft white ridge. Then the ridge widens. Small pockets appear. Edges lengthen. The surface begins to show the early pattern of cells. Each bee works with what she can touch. Her antennae move over the wax in front of her. Her feet grip the comb and the bodies of other bees. Her mandibles press and scrape the soft material. Nearby, another worker may be adding a new wax scale to the rim of a cell. A third may be warming the area with her body. A fourth may inspect a rough edge and remove a small piece. The order comes from many local signals. A worker can sense the thickness of a wall. She can feel whether nearby cells are already partly formed. She can respond to empty space along the edge. Temperature matters because warm wax can be shaped more easily. Body contact matters because bees build in crowded spaces where the size of their own bodies helps set distance and spacing. The word emergence can help describe this kind of order. Emergence means a large pattern forms from many smaller actions. No single worker bee needs to hold the whole comb in her mind. No bee needs to measure the entire sheet from one side to the other. Instead, each worker responds to the waxen bees nearest to her. The final pattern grows from thousands of small choices repeated again and again. This kind of building can be seen in many parts of insect life. Termites build large nests from small local actions. Ants form trails when many individuals follow scent marks left by others. Honeybees build comb from touch, warmth, wax, spacing, and the repeated behavior of workers along the growing edge. The colony creates order through simple rules carried out at scale. The comb also changes as the colony's needs change. During a heavy nectar flow, when many flowers are producing nectar, the colony may build more storage space. A strong nectar flow can happen for only a few weeks in a region, depending on weather and flowering plants. White clover, basswood, alfalfa, or orange blossom may each create a surge of incoming nectar in different landscapes. Foragers return again and again, and the workers inside need cells where nectar can be placed, spread, dried, and stored. During spring buildup, the pressure shifts toward brood space. The queen may lay hundreds or even more than 1,000 eggs in a day when conditions are good. Workers need clean cells in the warmer center of the nest. If the brood area is crowded, the queen has fewer places to lay. If the colony lacks storage cells, incoming nectar has fewer places to go. The shape of the comb serves both pressures because the same repeated cell can become food storage or brood space when the colony needs it. Small mistakes can be corrected while the comb grows. A wall that is too thick can be thinned. A weak rim can be strengthened. An irregular cell can be reshaped as neighboring cells develop around it. At the edge of a sheet where new wax is being added, the pattern may look uneven for a time. Further inward, where many workers have handled and adjusted the wax, the cells often appear steadier. This gives honeycomb a useful balance. It can grow into open space, but it can also be repaired. It can follow a regular pattern, but it can bend around obstacles. In a tree hollow, the comb may curve slightly with the shape of the cavity. In a managed hive, bees may build straight sheets when wooden frames guide the space. If a beekeeper leaves an awkward gap, bees may fill it with extra wax called burr comb. Their building responds to the space they are given. After the first rows of cells become strong enough, the structure begins receiving the life it was built to hold. Clean cells become places for eggs. Open chambers become places for food. Warm wax becomes the fixed interior of the colony. The first major use of this structure belongs to the young bees developing in darkness, one cell at a time. Across the cleaned wax surface, the queen moves slowly. Her workers surround her, touching her with their antennae and making space as she steps from cell to cell. In a strong colony of Apis mellifera, she may inspect many cells in a single hour. A clean worker cell has to be empty, polished, and ready. The queen lowers her abdomen into the opening, places one egg against the base, and moves on. The egg is tiny, white, and shaped like a small grain of rice. It stands upright at first, attached to the cell floor. Over the next few days, it leans to one side. After about 3 days, the egg hatches into a larva. This is where the word brood becomes useful. Brood simply means the developing young of the colony, eggs, larvae, and pupae. A larva looks very different from an adult bee. It has no wings, no working legs, and no hard striped body. It is soft, pale, and curled inside the cell, shaped more like a small comma than a flying insect. Nurse bees now become the main caretakers. These are young worker bees that spend much of their time inside the nest. They lower their heads into brood cells and feed the larvae again and again. The first food is rich glandular food made by nurse bees. As worker and drone larvae grow, their diet changes, and they receive a mixture that includes honey and pollen. Pollen matters because it supplies protein, fats, vitamins, and minerals. A bee larva is building body tissue quickly, and sugar alone cannot do that job. The cell gives this feeding process a controlled space. The larva stays in one chamber. The nurse bees come to it. The wax walls help separate one developing bee from the next. Nearby cells hold other larvae at slightly different ages, so a brood comb can become a living calendar. One cell may hold a fresh egg, another may hold a curled larva, another may already be sealed. The timing is steady enough that beekeepers often use brood stages to understand what has been happening in a colony during the last week or two. Worker larvae are usually capped when they are about 6 days old as larvae. Queen cells are capped a little earlier, at about 5.5 days after the larva hatches. Drone cells are capped a little later, at about 6.5 days after the larva hatches. The cap changes the cell into a closed chamber. Inside, the larva spins a thin cocoon and becomes a pupa. A pupa is the resting stage where the adult bee's body forms. The eyes darken, the legs, wings, antennae, and body segments take shape. The soft larval form is reorganized into an insect that can walk across wax, feed other bees, and eventually fly outside the hive. For a worker bee, the full development from egg to adult is commonly about 21 days under normal hive conditions. The egg stage lasts about 3 days. The larval stage lasts about 6 days. The capped pupal stage takes about 12 more days. At the end, the young adult chews through the wax cap and climbs out onto the comb. The cell does not stay empty for long. Workers clean it. They remove leftover cocoon bits and prepare the surface again. The queen may lay another egg there, beginning the cycle again. This repeated use is one reason brood comb grows darker over time. Each developing bee leaves a trace behind, and after many generations, the pale wax becomes brown and then very dark. The brood area also has to be kept warm. Honeybee brood develops best in a narrow, warm range, close to the middle 30s in degrees Celsius. Workers cluster over brood cells, generate heat with their flight muscles, and spread across the comb surface to hold the right conditions. The wax cell protects the young bee, while the adult workers maintain the space around it. A honeycomb cell is a small development chamber with food delivery, warmth, cleaning, sealing, and reuse built into colony life. Its shape matters because it gives each young bee a separate place to grow. Its size matters because worker bees, drones, and queens do not develop in identical rooms. Across the brood nest, the repeating pattern begins to show differences, and those differences reveal how the colony divides its future among different kinds of bees. At first glance, the brood nest can look like one steady field of wax. The capped cells form a soft pattern across the comb, with tan covers over developing bees and open cells scattered nearby. A closer look shows that the rooms are not all the same. Some cells are slightly smaller, with tighter openings and flatter-looking caps. Others are wider, with caps that often bulge outward a little more. Those small differences help the colony raise different kinds of bees. The most common brood cells in a colony of Apis mellifera are worker cells. Worker cells are used to raise female worker bees. These are the bees that clean the nest, feed larvae, build wax, receive nectar, guard the entrance, fan air, and later fly out to flowers. In many managed colonies, worker cells are often about 5.2 to 5.4 millimeters wide. That measurement is tiny, only a little wider than the thickness of a pencil eraser. Yet it matters because the developing bee grows inside that exact space. A worker bee begins from a fertilized egg. Fertilized means the egg has genetic material from the queen and from a male bee she mated with earlier in her life. The queen stores sperm inside a small organ in her body called the spermatheca. As she lays an egg, she can release sperm onto it, and that fertilized egg can develop into a female worker, or, under special feeding conditions, a queen. Most fertilized eggs in ordinary brood comb become workers. Their cells are the standard building blocks of the brood nest. Drones develop in larger cells. A drone is a male honeybee. His main role is reproduction, especially mating with a queen from another colony during the proper season. Drone cells in Apis mellifera are often about 6.2 to 6.4 millimeters wide. That difference of about 1 millimeter sounds small, but at bee scale, it creates a noticeably larger chamber. Drone brood caps often look more rounded than worker brood caps, giving that area of the comb a slightly bumpy surface. The queen usually lays an unfertilized egg in a drone cell. Unfertilized means the egg has genetic material from the queen alone. In honeybees, an unfertilized egg can develop into a male. This system is called haplodiploidy. The word is technical, but the basic idea is simple. Female bees come from fertilized eggs, while male drones come from unfertilized eggs. The comb helps make that system physical. A smaller worker cell guides the laying of one kind of egg. A larger drone cell is linked with another. The queen senses cell size as she moves across the comb. Her front legs and body contact the cell opening, before she lowers her abdomen. The cell size becomes part of the signal that helps shape what kind of egg is placed there. Drone cells are often built in certain regions of the comb, rather than spread evenly through every part of the brood nest. They may appear along lower edges, side areas, or patches where the colony has room to invest in males. A colony does not need drones in the same steady numbers as workers. Workers are needed every day for feeding, cleaning, heating, and foraging. Drones are more tied to the reproductive season, when colonies are strong and mating flights are possible. Queen cells create a different shape altogether. They are larger, special cells that often hang downward from the comb like rough peanut shells. A queen larva develops in a longer vertical chamber, and she receives a rich diet that shapes her growth. Queen cells may appear when a colony is preparing to swarm, replacing an old queen, or responding to the loss of a queen. Their shape makes them easy to notice against the flatter field of worker and drone cells. These differences turn the brood comb into a map of colony investment. Worker cells show the labor force being renewed. Drone cells show resources being spent on reproduction. Queen cells show a larger shift in colony life, sometimes toward swarming, sometimes toward emergency replacement. The repeated pattern still matters, but the pattern now has texture and purpose. Across one comb face, cell size, cap shape, placement, and contents can reveal what the colony is building toward. Brood fills one area. Pollen gathers nearby. Honey begins to collect above and around the young bees. The comb's order grows wider than cell size because every type of room needs the right food close enough for workers to reach. Across a full comb face, the cells begin to look like a quiet map. Near the middle, capped brood cells may form a broad oval patch, warm and closely tended. Around that area, some open cells hold bright pieces of pollen. Above it, or along the upper edges of the comb, other cells may hold nectar and honey. A beekeeper lifting a wooden frame from a hive box can often read this pattern by sight. Tan brood cappings show where young bees are sealed inside. Glossy open cells show nectar that still contains too much water. Deeper golden cells may hold ripened honey. Pollen can appear as packed bands of yellow, orange, cream, grey, or red-brown, depending on the flowers visited nearby. A wild comb inside a tree hollow can follow the same general logic, even without a wooden frame guiding it. The exact pattern shifts with season, colony strength, and the plants blooming outside. During spring growth, the brood area may expand as the queen lays more eggs. During a strong nectar flow, storage cells may fill quickly. When cold weather approaches in temperate regions, the colony depends more heavily on honey reserves. The pattern has a practical reason. Brood needs warmth and repeated feeding. Larvae cannot crawl across the comb to find food. They stay curled in their cells while nurse bees come to them. Those nurse bees need pollen close enough to reach often, because pollen supplies the protein, fats, vitamins, and minerals that growing larvae need. A larva builds muscles, glands, skin, and internal organs from those nutrients. Honey provides energy, but pollen provides much of the body-building material. Inside the hive, pollen is usually changed before it becomes long-term larval food. Foragers return with pollen packed onto their hind legs in tight pellets. These loads are held in pollen baskets, which are flattened areas bordered by stiff hairs. A returning forager may pass the pollen to a house bee or scrape it into a cell herself. Workers press the pollen down with their heads. They mix it with nectar or honey and bee secretions. Over time, the stored mixture becomes bee bread. Bee bread is simply pollen prepared and stored inside the comb, making it easier for the colony to use. It can look like colored layers packed into the cell, almost like tiny rings of different flower sources. That food is often placed near the brood nest because nurse bees need it constantly. A worker feeding larvae may move from a pollen cell to a brood cell many times. Shorter trips save effort when thousands of larvae need attention. The arrangement also helps with warmth. The brood area is usually kept in the warm central part of the nest. Worker bees cluster over it, press their bodies close to the wax, and generate heat from their muscles. Honey stored above or around the brood area supplies fuel for that heating work. A bee can eat honey, turn the sugar into energy, and use that energy to warm the nest or perform other labor. The comb places food and developing bees in useful relationships. This map is never drawn once and left unchanged. It is made by constant activity. The queen lays where clean cells are available. Nurse bees feed larvae where brood has already gathered. Foragers unload nectar to house bees, which place it where open cells can receive it. Workers consume pollen and honey, creating empty spaces that can be used again. A cell that held pollen last week may later hold nectar. A cell that raised a worker bee may be cleaned and used for another egg. A honey cell may be opened during a rainy stretch when foragers cannot fly. The larger pattern emerges from all of these small acts. No worker needs to plan the whole arrangement. The colony's needs keep shaping the contents of the comb. Warmth pulls brood toward the center. Feeding pulls pollen close to larvae. Storage pulls honey into spaces where it can be ripened, capped, and saved. The honeycomb now carries more than shape. It carries location. A worker moving across it passes through zones of age, food, energy, and growth. The same wax sheet holds young bees that must be fed, pollen that helps them grow, and honey that powers the workers caring for them. The sweetest part of this structure begins as something much thinner than honey. It arrives from flowers as watery nectar, carried home in the body of a forager, and placed into cells where the comb helps change it. Outside the hive, a forager lands on a flower and reaches down with her tongue. That tongue is called a proboscis. It works like a flexible drinking tube, drawing up nectar from the flower's hidden glands. Nectar is a sugary liquid made by plants, often as a reward for visiting insects. A clover flower, an apple blossom, a basswood bloom, or an orange blossom may offer only a tiny droplet at a time. To fill herself, a worker may visit dozens of flowers during one trip, moving from bloom to bloom while the warm part of the day is bright enough for flight. The nectar does not go straight into the stomach, used mainly for digestion. A honeybee carries it in a separate storage pouch, often called the honey stomach or crop. This pouch lets the bee transport nectar back to the colony without immediately using it all as food. During flight, some of the sugar can still fuel her body, but much of the load is saved for the hive. When the forager returns, she steps through the entrance and moves into the darker, warmer interior. There, she meets a house bee. The forager brings a droplet of nectar back up from the honey stomach and passes it mouth to mouth. This sharing is called trophallaxis, which simply means food transfer between animals. Inside a honeybee colony, trophallaxis helps move nectar from outdoor foragers to indoor workers that process and store it. The nectar begins changing during this handling. Bees add enzymes, which are small natural proteins that help chemical reactions happen. One important enzyme helps split sucrose, a common plant sugar, into simpler sugars called glucose and fructose. Another enzyme can help create small amounts of substances that make honey more acidic and less friendly to many microbes. The exact chemistry depends on the nectar source, bee handling, temperature, and time. Still, the main direction is clear. Thin flower nectar is being changed into a thicker, more stable food. Fresh nectar can contain a lot of water. Some nectars are more than half water, and many are much thinner than finished honey. Ripe honey is usually much more concentrated, often around 17 or 18% water. That lower water level is one reason honey can be stored for long periods. Most yeasts and bacteria have trouble growing when water is so tightly held by sugar. The comb helps this change happen. A worker may place a small droplet of nectar along the upper inner wall of a cell, spreading it into a thin film rather than leaving it as one deep pool. A thinner layer gives water more surface area from which to evaporate. Other bees fan their wings nearby, moving air through the hive. Warm air and moving air carry moisture away from the nectar. The cell becomes part of a slow drying system. Researchers studying honey ripening have examined how cell diameter can affect evaporation. A wider or narrower cell changes the surface area exposed to air and the distance moisture must move. At bee scale, a difference of a millimeter can affect how a droplet sits, how air reaches it, and how quickly water leaves. The familiar honeycomb cell is therefore more than a storage cup. Its size and shape help manage the physical process of drying nectar. Workers may also move nectar from one cell to another as it thickens. A fresh droplet can be placed in one open cell, handled again, and later stored elsewhere. During a strong nectar flow, a hive can smell warm and floral because many cells contain ripening nectar at different stages. Some cells hold thin, shining liquid. Others hold thicker honey that clings more heavily to the wax. Across the comb, bees keep testing, moving, and drying the stored food. The transformation takes labor. Foragers collect the raw liquid. House bees receive it. Other workers fan air. Cells hold the nectar in small exposed amounts. Enzymes change the sugars while water slowly leaves. What began as a flower's watery reward becomes a dense energy reserve the colony can use during rain, drought, winter, or any stretch when flowers are scarce. At a certain point, the honey becomes concentrated enough for long storage. The open cell has done its work as a drying chamber. Now the colony protects that stored energy under a thin cover of wax. On a comb face, open cells and capped cells catch the light differently. An open honey cell may shine like amber glass. The liquid inside reflects the small movements of bees passing over it. A capped honey cell looks softer and flatter, covered by a pale wax lid that can be cream-colored, white, or light yellow. Across a frame from a managed hive, these sealed honey cells may form broad patches near the top, where colonies often store food above the brood area. The cap tells a worker that the honey inside has reached a useful storage state. Nectar entered the hive with a high water content. After handling, enzyme action, and evaporation, it became concentrated honey. When honey is thick enough, workers cover the opening with wax. That cap helps separate the stored food from the moist air moving through the hive. Honey naturally pulls water toward itself. This water-pulling quality is called hygroscopic. A dry, sugar-rich food can absorb moisture from the air around it. If stored honey takes in too much water, yeasts can grow more easily, and fermentation becomes more likely. Fermentation is the process where yeasts break sugars down and produce alcohol and gas. Inside a hive, that would turn a stable food reserve into a problem. The wax cap reduces that risk. It gives the colony a way to hold summer nectar through rainy days, cold weeks, or a long winter when flowers are unavailable. Brood cells are sealed for a different reason. A larva grows in an open cell while nurse bees feed it. When the larva reaches the right stage, workers close the cell with a cap made from wax and other materials. Inside that closed space, the larva spins a thin cocoon and becomes a pupa. During the pupal stage, the adult bee's body forms. The eyes darken, the legs fold into shape, the wings develop. The antennae, mouthparts, and striped outer body become recognizable before the young adult finally chews through the cap. The timing depends on the kind of bee developing inside. A queen cell is usually capped when the larva is about 5.5 days old. A worker cell is capped at about 6 days of larval age. A drone cell is capped a little later, at about 6.5 days of larval age. Those small timing differences fit the different development schedules of queens, workers, and drones. A worker bee usually takes about 21 days to develop from egg to adult. A drone usually takes about 24 days. A queen can develop more quickly, often in about 16 days, because her feeding and cell conditions are different. Honey cappings and brood cappings also look and behave differently. Honey cappings are often lighter and flatter, especially when fresh. Brood cappings tend to look tan or brown, and worker brood cappings may appear slightly porous. Drone brood cappings often bulge outward more because drones develop in larger cells. A beekeeper can learn to read these surfaces. A smooth patch of capped honey near the top of a frame means stored food. A compact oval of capped brood near the center means young bees are developing beneath the surface. A scattered pattern with too many empty spaces may show that something has interrupted egg laying, brood survival, or cell care. For the bees, each cap changes how a cell interacts with the nest. An open cell can receive food, lose moisture, release scent, or be inspected directly. A sealed cell becomes a protected chamber. The contents keep changing, but the work becomes less visible. Honey rests as stored energy. A pupa quietly reorganizes into an adult bee. The wax surface holds those processes in place while workers continue moving over it. Capping also shows how much the comb depends on air and moisture. Honey needs drying before it is sealed. Brood needs warmth while it develops under its cap. The wax lid helps, yet the larger conditions around the cell still matter. A hive has to move moist air out, hold warmth near the brood, and keep the wax stable enough for storage and development. The sealed cells are part of a wider climate system, shaped by the wings, muscles, bodies, and movements of the bees around them. Around the sealed brood cells, the air has to stay carefully warm. A developing honeybee is small, soft, and sealed behind wax for part of its life. Yet its body is changing quickly inside that chamber. The nervous system forms. muscles develop. Wings take shape while still folded close to the body. Those changes depend on temperature. For honeybee brood, the safest range is roughly 33 to 36 degrees Celsius. That is warmer than a comfortable room for a person, and the colony holds that warmth across a living surface made of wax. Too much cooling can slow development. Too much heat can damage young bees. A colony of Apis mellifera manages this by using thousands of workers as small sources of warmth, movement, and air control. A worker bee can make heat with her flight muscles. These muscles sit in the thorax, the middle part of the bee's body. During flight, they power the wings. Inside the hive, a worker can activate those muscles without taking off, so the body produces metabolic heat. Metabolic heat is warmth released as the bee uses food energy. Honey supplies much of that energy. Sugar from stored honey can be turned into movement, and some of that movement becomes warmth around the brood. Workers gather over brood cells in a close layer. Their bodies cover the wax like a living blanket. In cooler conditions, bees cluster more tightly. The spaces between bodies shrink. Warm air becomes trapped close to the comb surface. Some workers press their bodies against capped cells, sending heat into the wax and the developing bee beneath it. When the nest becomes too warm, the pattern changes. Bees spread out. More air can pass between them. Workers turn toward the hive entrance or across the comb and fan their wings. Fanning moves warm, moist air away from one area and pulls fresher air through the nest. In hot weather, bees may also bring water into the hive. A thin film of water placed on comb or passed among workers can cool the nest as it evaporates. Evaporation means liquid water changes into vapor, and that change carries heat away. This same air movement helps the colony make honey. Nectar enters the hive with far more water than finished honey. Workers place small amounts of nectar in cells, spread it thinly, and move air across the comb. The fanning that cools a brood nest on a hot day can also help pull moisture out of ripening nectar. Climate control ties together the nursery and the pantry. Young bees need stable warmth. Nectar needs drying. Wax needs workable conditions while comb is being built. A hive with poor airflow would struggle to remove moisture from nectar. A brood area with poor heat control would make development less reliable. Comb works because the colony manages the air around it. The wax itself also responds to temperature. Warm wax can be shaped when workers are building or repairing cells. Cooler wax becomes firmer and better at holding weight. Inside the nest, those two needs exist close together. The growing edge of comb may need warmth and softness. A capped honey area needs a stable wall. Brood comb needs heat without softening so much that structure weakens. The colony handles this through constant local adjustment, rather than one whole hive command. A worker near brood may generate heat. Another worker near ripening nectar may fan. Others may shift position as the temperature changes through the day. Outside weather matters too. A cool spring night, a humid summer afternoon, or a sudden rainstorm can all change the work inside the nest. The entrance may become crowded with fanning bees during hot weather. In cooler hours, more workers may gather over brood. Through all of this, the comb remains the surface where climate becomes practical. Heat moves through wax. Moisture leaves open cells. air passes across capped brood and ripening honey. Worker bodies touch the surface again and again, reading conditions through movement, temperature, scent, and vibration. The honeycomb has become more than a set of chambers. It is a warm, working surface, shaped by air and bodies. A surface that carries warmth can also carry signals, and the same wax that holds young bees and honey can become the place where information moves through the dark. Inside the hive, the comb is mostly in darkness. A forager returning from flowers steps out of daylight and enters a crowded space where vision works differently than it does outside. The nest may smell of warm wax, honey, pollen, propolis, and thousands of bee bodies. Workers pass over one another on the comb surface. A returning forager carrying news of food has to share that news without pointing toward a bright landscape. She does it on the wax itself. The waggle dance begins when a forager moves in a short, vibrating run across the comb. Then she loops back and repeats the movement. The dance may look small from a human view, but for the bees near her, it carries useful information about flowers beyond the hive. The angle of the waggle run helps show direction. Honeybees use the sun as a reference point. If the dancer moves straight upward on the vertical comb, that can mean the food source lies in the direction of the sun. A run angled to one side can point to a food source at a matching angle away from the sun's position. The duration of the waggle run helps communicate distance. A longer waggle run generally points to a farther food source. This system lets a bee that has found rich nectar or pollen guide other workers toward the same place. The dance happens on the comb because the comb gives the colony a stable surface. A dancer needs traction. Followers need to stand close. They need to track her path, touch her body, and receive signals through more than one sense. In the darkness, a follower may place her antennae near the dancing bee. Antennae are the paired feelers on a bee's head, and they are packed with sensory structures. They detect smell, touch, humidity, air movement, and tiny vibrations. During a waggle dance, the dancer also produces short bursts of sound and air movement. These are near-field sounds, which means they are strongest very close to the moving bee rather than carrying far through open air. The follower has to be near the dancer to detect them clearly. Inside each antenna is a sensory structure called Johnston's organ. This organ helps bees detect movement of the antenna itself, including tiny vibrations and air movements. Research has found that honeybee antennae and the nerve cells connected with Johnston's organ respond strongly to dance-related sounds around 250 to 300 Hz. A hertz is a measure of vibration each second. So a sound at 300 Hz vibrates 300 times in 1 second. At that scale, the waggle dance becomes more than a visible motion. It is a close-range signal made of body movement, vibration, sound, smell, and touch. Followers do not simply watch from a distance. They crowd in. They face the dancer. They touch her with antennae. They may sample scent from the flowers she visited, because flower odor can cling to a forager's body. A follower can then leave the hive with several clues at once: direction, distance, scent, and the urgency shown by how strongly the dancer repeats her run. The comb carries this communication because it connects many bees in one place. A dance performed on loose ground would lose much of its value inside a nest. A dance performed on wax can be followed, repeated, and felt. The same surface that holds brood and honey also becomes a map room for the colony's food search. This has direct consequences for the comb itself. More successful foragers mean more nectar entering the hive. More nectar means more cells needed for ripening and storage. A strong food source can increase the pressure for workers to draw out new comb or clear empty cells. Information moving across wax can turn into construction, storage, and feeding within hours. The dance also shows how tightly the inside and outside worlds are joined. A patch of clover in a field, a basswood tree in bloom along a street, or an apple orchard opening in spring can be translated into movement on a dark comb face. Other bees receive the message, leave through the entrance, and add their own trips to the flow of food. This communication system belongs to honeybees before any wooden hive box or removable frame. It developed in nests where comb hung from natural ceilings, inside hollows shaped by trees, rocks, and sheltered cavities. The wax surface carried messages there too, long before humans learned how to build around it. In a hollow tree, the nest begins with the shape of the space itself. The walls may be rough with old wood. The ceiling may curve where a branch once grew. A narrow entrance may open several meters above the ground, small enough for guard bees to defend, but wide enough for foragers to come and go. For wild colonies of Apis mellifera, tree cavities are common nesting places. A cavity gives darkness, shelter from rain, some protection from wind, and a more stable place to warm the brood. The bees do not need a square box to make comb. They need an overhead surface where wax can be attached. Workers begin near the top of the cavity and build downward. The first comb may hang like a pale tongue of wax from the ceiling. As more wax is added, the sheet lengthens. A second sheet may begin beside it. Then a third may grow if the cavity has enough room. In a good natural nest, the combs often hang roughly parallel to one another, like pages in a thick book. Each sheet has cells on both faces. The space between sheets matters. Bees need enough room to pass from one comb face to another. Workers carrying nectar have to reach storage cells. Nurse bees have to move over brood areas. The queen has to walk across prepared cells while laying eggs. Fanning bees need space for air to move. If combs are too close together, movement becomes difficult. If they are too far apart, the colony has more empty air to warm and defend. Honeybees keep a working gap between comb surfaces. This living corridor lets bees pass, turn, feed larvae, unload nectar, clean cells, and cluster when the temperature drops. The same spacing later became important to beekeepers, but it existed first as part of the bee's own building behavior. A wild cavity also shapes the size and curve of the comb. Inside a straight hollow, comb sheets may hang neatly. Inside an uneven tree, a sheet may bend around a knot, avoid a rough wall, or stop where space runs out. Workers can attach wax to the side of the cavity for support. They may leave narrow channels where bees can travel. They may thicken an edge where honey adds weight. A large honey-filled comb can become heavy, especially during a strong nectar flow, so the attachment points above have to hold. The nest interior changes with the seasons. In spring, brood may fill the warmer central combs as pollen becomes available. During summer, nectar flows. Honey can spread into upper cells and outer areas. In colder months, the cluster of bees may move slowly across stored honey, eating as they go and keeping the group warm. The comb does not sit in the tree as a frozen object. it becomes the fixed structure around which seasonal movement happens. Other honeybee species show how flexible the basic idea can be. The giant honeybee, Apis dorsata, often builds a single large exposed comb under a high branch, cliff edge, or building overhang in parts of South and Southeast Asia. That comb can hang in the open, covered by layers of bees. The dwarf honeybee, Apis florea, also builds exposed single combs, often around slender branches. Those species use wax comb without the same enclosed cavity pattern familiar from Apis mellifera. For the western honeybee, enclosed nesting is central. The cavity protects the parallel combs and helps the colony control heat, moisture, scent, and defense. The famous wooden hive box is a human version of a protected cavity. It gives bees a dry, enclosed space with room to hang comb downward. Long before frames were added, the bees already knew how to turn a ceiling into sheets of wax. Human beekeeping eventually learned to respect that natural order. The space between combs, the downward growth, the need for passageways, and the weight of stored honey all became design problems for hive makers. The rules came from the wild nest first. Managed hives did not create honeycomb behavior. They gave an ancient behavior a new container. Across the wider bee world, though, social insects have found more than one way to build nurseries and food stores from wax-like materials. A bee nest can take many forms. The flat sheets of Apis honeycomb are famous because they are so regular. But social bees have more than one way to protect young, store food, and build a shared home. Bumblebees show a different answer. Many bumblebee colonies begin in small hidden spaces, such as old mouse nests, grass tussocks, compost piles, or gaps under sheds. A queen bumblebee often starts the colony alone in spring. She has survived winter as a mated queen, and when the weather warms, she searches for a nesting site. At first, the colony may contain only the queen, a small wax pot of nectar, and a few developing young. Compared with a honeybee colony, a bumblebee colony is usually much smaller. A strong honeybee colony may contain tens of thousands of workers. Many bumblebee colonies contain only a few dozen to a few hundred workers, depending on the species and season. Their nest structure reflects that smaller scale. Bumblebee brood is often arranged in clusters rather than in broad, flat sheets of repeated hexagons. They make wax, but their wax is used in a more rounded and irregular way. Small wax cups can hold nectar. Brood cells can be grouped together in uneven patches. The nest can look lumpy and crowded, shaped around the space available and the queen's early work. This arrangement still solves the basic problems. Young bees need protection. Food has to be stored nearby. Workers need to move through the nest and keep the brood warm. Bumblebees can also generate heat with their flight muscles, and some species are active in cool weather when many other insects are slow. Their nest architecture supports a smaller colony with a shorter seasonal life. In many temperate places, most of the colony dies before winter, while new queens leave to mate and find places to overwinter. Stingless bees add another kind of building system. They are close relatives of honeybees and bumblebees, and they live in tropical and subtropical regions, including parts of Central America, South America, Africa, Asia, and Australia. The name stingless bee can be a little misleading. They do have stingers, but the stingers are too reduced to be used for defense in the way a honeybee uses one. Instead, Some stingless bees defend themselves by biting, swarming, or using sticky plant resins. Their building material is often called cerumen. Cerumen is a mixture of wax made by bees and resin gathered from plants. Plant resin is sticky material that trees and other plants produce around wounds, buds, and bark. When bees mix resin with wax, the result can be tougher, darker, and more protective than wax alone. Many stingless bees use cerumen to build brood structures, entrance tubes, storage pots, and protective layers inside the nest. Their honey storage can look very different from the flat comb of apis bees. Instead of neat hexagonal cells across a sheet, stingless bees often store honey and pollen in rounded pots. These pots can be clustered together like small brown jars. The brood may be arranged in horizontal layers, spirals, or clusters, depending on the species. Some stingless bee nests have beautiful circular brood plates, with new cells added at the edge as the colony grows. This comparison makes honeycomb feel more specific. Honey bees of the genus Apis are especially tied to repeated wax combs, with many similar cells sharing walls. Bumblebees often build smaller, less regular wax structures for seasonal colonies. Stingless bees often use wax mixed with resin and store food in pot-like chambers. The materials differ, the shapes differ, the colony sizes and climates differ. The underlying needs remain close enough to recognize. Social bees need protected space for brood. They need stored food close to the workers that use it. They need building materials they can make or gather. They need an interior that supports feeding, movement, defense, and temperature control. Apis honeycomb is one especially efficient solution to those pressures. Its flat sheets, repeated cells, shared wax walls, and storage capacity made it especially noticeable to humans. People could see it, cut it, carry it, melt it, taste from it, and eventually design hives around it. The distinctive comb of honeybees became the structure humans learned to harvest first, then protect, then guide with wooden boxes and movable frames. Long before hive boxes, honeycomb was something people had to reach by risk and force. One famous rock painting from the Cuevas de la Araña, near Bicorp in eastern Spain, shows a human figure climbing toward a wild bee nest with a container in hand. The image is often described as thousands of years old, and it captures the older relationship clearly. Honey was valuable. Wax was useful. Getting them from a wild colony could mean climbing, smoke, stings, broken comb, and a damaged nest left behind. Early honey hunting usually treated comb as something to cut away. A person could take honey and wax, but the colony might lose brood, stored food, and the built structure it needed to recover. The same problem continued in many early forms of beekeeping. People found ways to keep bees closer to home, using hollow logs, clay vessels, woven baskets, or straw hives. A skep was a dome-shaped hive often made from twisted straw or grass. It could shelter a colony, but the comb inside was fixed to the walls. Fixed comb means the bees attach their wax sheets directly to the inside of the hive. A beekeeper could not simply lift out one comb, inspect it, and return it. Harvesting honey from a fixed comb hive often meant cutting out the wax structure. That could destroy stored food, brood cells, and the careful spacing the bees had built. It also made colony inspection difficult. A beekeeper had limited ability to see whether the queen was laying eggs. Disease could spread in hidden brood comb. A failing colony might go unnoticed until too late. Controlled harvesting, queen management, and careful reuse of comb were all harder when the wax could not be moved. The major change came from learning to respect the space bees naturally leave between combs. Lorenzo Lorraine Langstroth, a minister and beekeeper in the United States, patented his movable comb hive in 1852. His design became one of the foundations of modern beekeeping. The key idea was bee space. Bee space is a gap large enough for bees to use as a walkway, yet narrow enough that they usually leave it open. Langstroth worked with a spacing close to 3/8 of an inch. In metric terms, that is a little under 1 centimeter. If the gap is much smaller, bees may seal it with propolis, the sticky resin material they gather from plants. If the gap is much larger, they may fill it with extra wax comb. That extra wax is often called burr comb. Burr comb appears where bees build in spaces that do not match the beekeeper's intended frame layout. Bee space made removable frames practical. In a Langstroth-style hive, wooden frames hang inside a box with careful spacing between them. The bees build comb inside the frames. The beekeeper can lift out one frame at a time, look at brood, check for eggs, inspect honey stores, and return the comb without tearing the whole nest apart. This changed the human relationship with honeycomb. Comb could be preserved. Brood could be seen. Honey could be harvested with less damage to the colony. A frame of capped honey could be removed, uncapped, emptied, and placed back for the bees to refill. A frame with eggs and young larvae could show that the queen had been active in the last few days. A frame with patchy brood could warn that something was wrong. The hive became easier to read because the comb became movable. Langstroth did not change the basic behavior of honeybees. He built around it. The bees still made wax from their bodies. They still formed cells, raised brood, stored pollen, ripened nectar, and sealed honey. The difference was the container. A well-spaced frame gave their natural comb building a shape that humans could handle. Modern beekeeping grew from that practical compromise. The colony kept its wax architecture. The beekeeper gained access without destroying the whole interior. Once comb could be lifted, inspected, and reused, people began giving bees more than an empty frame. They began offering guides for the very first walls of the cells themselves. Inside a modern hive box, an empty wooden frame gives the colony a boundary. The frame is usually a simple rectangle, open in the middle, with a top bar that hangs from a ledge inside the hive. To a beekeeper, it is equipment. To the bees, it becomes a guided place to attach wax, walk, store food, and raise young. Left alone with only empty space, honeybees can still build comb. They may hang wax from the top of the frame, curve it around open gaps, or attach it to nearby surfaces. When the spacing is awkward, they may add burr comb between frames or brace comb between a frame and the hive wall. Burr comb is extra wax built where the beekeeper did not intend it. Brace comb is wax used like a connector, helping attach one surface to another. Both show that bees keep responding to space in their own way. Foundation gives their building a stronger starting guide. A sheet of foundation sits inside the frame. It may be made of beeswax or plastic coated with beeswax. Across the surface are shallow impressions shaped like the bases of honeycomb cells. These impressions are not finished cells. They are more like a faint wax blueprint. for where the cell bottoms should begin. Worker bees climb over the sheet, warm it with their bodies, add fresh wax from their glands, and begin drawing the comb outward. Beekeepers call this drawing out foundation. The phrase means the bees extend the short stamped cell bases into full, deep chambers. A flat sheet slowly becomes a working comb. The bees add sidewalls. They deepen the cells. They smooth rims. They build the familiar hexagonal openings outward from the guide. The final comb is still bee-built because the workers produce, shape, and repair the wax. The foundation simply channels that work into a straighter, more removable form. This matters when honey is harvested. A frame full of capped honey can be lifted from the hive. The beekeeper removes the wax cappings with a knife, fork, or uncapping tool, exposing the sealed honey underneath. Then the frame can be placed in an extractor. A honey extractor spins the frame quickly using centrifugal force. Centrifugal force is the outward push felt when something spins. In the extractor, that spinning motion pulls honey out of the open cells and throws it against the inside wall of the machine. The honey drains down and can be collected, while much of the wax comb remains in the frame. That preserved comb is valuable to the bees. A colony that receives drawn comb does not have to spend as much food energy making new wax before storing honey again. During a strong nectar flow, that can matter. Foragers may be returning with nectar all day. House bees need empty cells where they can place, dry, and ripen it. If a beekeeper gives the colony empty foundation, workers must build the cell walls before those cells can hold much nectar. If drawn comb is returned after extraction, the storage space is already present. The bees can clean it, repair torn edges, and begin refilling it more quickly. Managed comb also helps with inspection. A beekeeper can lift one frame and see capped brood, open larvae, eggs, pollen bands, nectar, honey stores, queen cells, or signs of disease. Comb that can be moved becomes information. A single frame may show whether the queen has laid recently. Fresh eggs mean she was present within the last few days. Open larvae show active nursing. Capped brood shows young bees developing beneath the wax. Stored pollen near brood shows food for larvae. Capped honey near the top shows energy reserves. Frames and foundation changed beekeeping by making the bee's natural structure easier to handle. The colony still follows its ancient building rules. Workers still make wax scales from their bodies. Cells still grow through heat, pressure, and repeated shaping. Honey still ripens in small chambers. Brood still develops under caps. The human equipment guides the location and direction of the work. That guidance connects the hive to farms, orchards, markets, kitchens, and winter management. A sheet of comb can become part of food production without losing its biological meaning. People value honeycomb because it holds honey, preserves labor, and reveals colony life. Its usefulness also reaches beyond the hive because the same shared wall pattern solves a material problem that engineers recognize in very different places. The six-sided pattern travels far from the hive because its usefulness does not depend on beeswax. A honeycomb-like structure can be made from aluminum, paper, cardboard, plastic, or carbon fiber composites. The material changes, yet the basic problem remains familiar. Builders want strength without unnecessary weight. A solid block can be strong, but it uses a large amount of material. A hollow structure can be light, but it may bend, crush, or twist too easily. Honeycomb geometry offers a middle path. It fills space with many small cells, and the cell walls help spread force through the structure. One common human version is called a honeycomb sandwich panel. The name sounds unusual, but the idea is simple. Two thin outer sheets, often called skins, are placed on either side of a lightweight honeycomb core. The skins carry much of the pulling and pushing force across the surface. The core holds those skins apart and keeps them from buckling inward. A thicker panel usually resists bending better than a thin sheet made from the same amount of material. The honeycomb core creates that thickness with far less weight than a solid slab. This is why honeycomb panels appear in places where every kilogram matters. Aircraft interiors can use honeycomb panels in floors, partitions, doors, and control surfaces. A lighter part can reduce fuel use across thousands of flights. Some boat hulls, train panels, racing parts, and satellite structures use similar ideas. Packaging engineers use honeycomb cardboard to protect heavy items during shipping. A honeycomb paper core can absorb impact by crushing in a controlled way, giving fragile objects more protection than a flat sheet alone. Inside a simple hollow core door, cardboard honeycomb can help the door keep its shape while staying light enough to open easily. The details change with each job. An aircraft panel may use aluminum or composite skins. A shipping insert may use paper. A protective helmet liner or impact panel may use polymers, which are long-chain materials that include many plastics and foams. A building panel may use honeycomb structure for stiffness, insulation, or sound control. The cell size, wall thickness, and material all change the way the panel behaves. Small cells can create a smoother, more evenly supported surface. Thicker cell walls can increase strength, but they add weight. A deeper core can make a panel stiffer, but it also takes up more space. Engineers tune these choices the way bees adjust wax to the needs of the colony. Though the human process uses drawings, tests, machines, and measurements. The connection should be understood carefully. Modern engineers did not simply copy every detail of a bee nest. Human honeycomb panels come from mathematics, materials science, manufacturing, and the physical need to save weight. Still, the repeated hexagonal cell keeps appearing because it solves a real problem. It uses shared walls. It spreads load. It creates useful volume with less material. It can crush gradually under impact or stay stiff when the design calls for stiffness. A honeycomb core also shows why empty space can be useful. The open cells are part of the structure. They reduce weight while the walls carry force. In an aircraft panel, the air inside the cells helps keep the part light. In a cardboard shipping panel, the open spaces allow controlled compression. In a wax comb, the cells hold honey, brood, pollen, and air. The purpose changes, but the shape keeps turning material into organized space. This brings the idea back to the bees. A worker honeybee does not need metal, glue, resin, or a factory press. She works with wax scales, warmth, mouthparts, legs, and nearby workers. The colony builds a lightweight structure strong enough to hold food, young bees, and the movement of thousands of bodies. Human-made honeycomb shows the same pattern from another direction. When material is costly, weight matters, and space has to be divided carefully, repeated cells become a powerful solution. After passing through hives, frames, extractors, aircraft panels, doors, and shipping boxes, the pattern can return to where it began. A golden wax surface inside a colony now carries more meaning than its shape alone. Back inside the hive, the comb can be seen again as a golden surface under moving bees. A worker crosses a row of open cells. Her antennae touch one rim, then another. Nearby, capped honey rests behind pale wax. Deeper in the brood area, sealed cells hold pupae changing into adult bees. A small patch of pollen may show yellow, orange, or dull red, depending on the flowers visited beyond the entrance. The same sheet of wax now carries many layers of meaning. Each wall began as tiny scales from worker bees. Those scales came from wax glands on the underside of the abdomen, produced from food energy and handled with legs and mouthparts. About 1,250 scales may make a single gram of beeswax. A kilogram of wax can represent many kilograms of honey consumed by the colony. That cost is hidden when the comb looks still. It becomes clearer when the surface is understood as stored labor. Every smooth rim, repaired edge, and shared wall has passed through the bodies of bees. The hexagonal pattern also carries a practical history. Six-sided cells fit together with shared walls. Shared walls save wax. Saving wax matters when wax is made from honey, and honey begins as nectar gathered one flower visit at a time. The shape solves a material problem at the scale of an insect colony. It gives the bees thousands of usable chambers without filling the nest with extra wall. The pattern looks exact from a distance, yet it forms through a living process. Young cells may begin rounded. Warm wax can soften. Worker bees compress, chew, add, scrape, and smooth. Neighboring cells meet one another and settle into shared boundaries. The final form grows from both bee behavior and wax physics. The comb is shaped by small animals, warm material, and repeated contact. Inside those cells, the colony renews itself. A queen places an egg at the base of a clean chamber. After about 3 days, the egg becomes a larva. Nurse bees feed it again and again. Workers cap the cell when the larva is ready to pupate. About 21 days after the egg is laid, a worker bee can chew through the cap and step out onto the comb surface. The chamber can then be cleaned and used again. Other cells hold food. Nectar arrives from flowers in a forager's honey stomach. House bees receive it, add enzymes, place it in cells, move it, spread it, and fan air across the comb until enough water leaves. Thick honey can then be sealed under wax, protected from moisture that could allow fermentation. Pollen is packed nearby as bee bread, giving young bees the protein and fats they need to grow. Honey supplies energy for flight, heating, wax production, and long stretches when flowers are scarce. The comb also holds climate. Brood needs warmth close to 33 to 36 degrees Celsius. Workers cluster over capped cells, use their flight muscles to produce heat, spread out when the nest warms, and fan air when moisture or heat must move. Wax becomes workable when warm and dependable when firm. The same material that softens during building can later hold honey, brood, pollen, and the weight of many bees. Across its surface, information moves as well. A returning forager can dance on the comb in darkness. Followers touch her with antennae and detect movement, scent, vibration, and near-field sound. A field of clover, a blooming basswood tree, or an orchard in spring can become a pattern of movement on wax. Other workers receive the signal and fly out, bringing back more nectar to fill more cells. Wild colonies built this architecture in tree hollows and sheltered cavities long before wooden hive boxes existed. Humans later learned to work with the same spacing, first through movable frames, then through foundation, extractors, and reusable comb. Engineers found the same geometry useful in aircraft panels, cardboard packaging, doors, and lightweight structures, because repeated cells can give strength while saving material. The original honeycomb remains the clearest version. A sheet of wax inside a colony solves many linked problems at once. It makes space. It saves material. It holds young bees, stored food, heat, moisture, scent, vibration, and movement. A honeycomb surface can still look simple in the low light of the hive. Its order is quiet. Its color is warm. Its cells repeat softly across the wax. Now, inside that repeating pattern, there is a whole colony's work. Nectar gathered from flowers, wax made from honey, young bees sealed in darkness, food saved for later, and thousands of small bodies keeping the structure alive.